Villains. Gotta love them. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they can be a great way to provide conflict in a well-written story. We're no strangers to discussing villains here on the mechanist channel, and we often enjoy other creators' videos exploring fiction's most evil and deplorable characters. Often, but not always. What do you get when you cross a mediocre commentary channel with even worse media criticism? You get Just a Robot's magnum opus, The Problem with Female Villains. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Where do I even begin? I suppose I could wax 7th grade philosophical about the nature of love and hate for a solid minute.
Love is the most powerful emotion, but hate is the second strongest emotion. The same way love can give you purpose in life, being the reason for many to get out of bed in the morning, those who do not have someone to love need someone to hate to fill that void.
But that'd be a shit way to start a video. So why don't we cut to the chase and see what Just a Robot has to say about villains. Just the lady ones, of course. But before we begin, go ahead and watch Jar's video now, because given the fact that we'll only be playing clips of where he makes a point, you'll be missing most of it here. His central thesis is that female villains aren't what they used to be. It's been a real downhill decline, if you will. And in the video, Jar and fellow YouTuber Spy V hope to explain why. We'll start with Just a Robot's bit, which is most of it. He posits the current slate of villains in modern entertainment don't hold a candle to the pantheon of classic female villains that he lists, such as Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and... wait, that's it? That's his only example? 5,000 years of human storytelling, and he chose one character from a Nickelodeon cartoon in the 2000s. Incredible. No Lady Macbeth, Ishtar, Medusa, Nurse Ratched, Regina George, Wicked Witch of the West. Can I get some love for my girl Madam Gasket? And he calls himself a robot. Sure, Jim Broadbent played her, but she's still my rusty iron queen. Aunt Fanny who? But these are just the villains from the before times, when every female villain was assumed to be good. Just because Jar didn't mention any of these names doesn't mean he doesn't know about them. Surely Azula just stood out to him because he has a lot to say about her and the way that the writers developed her character.
Azula is the only character in the entire series who can use blue fire, which is about twice as hot as normal fire. She fucking one-shot Aang while he was in the Avatar state. She's smart, calculating, beautiful, and funny.
Okay, so she's powerful, manipulative, and complex. And I agree, she's a great villain. Azula serves as a rival and foil to Zuko throughout the story, representing the opposite side of the Fire Lord's abusive parenting. An overachiever who ties her sense of self-worth to her ability to destroy her enemies and impress her father. Her determination to win at life is so central to her being that when she starts losing, it breaks her mind. She's something of a tragic figure, a product of a toxic environment, but no less an unrepented monster. Anything to add, Jar?
Wait, hang on, let me look up her age here. Holy shit, she's only 14. And you would think that a lot of writers would try to take some tips from her on how to make good female villains.
Yes, but actually no.
But unfortunately, a few years after Azula, a lot of female villains started going really downhill. So now let's talk about a female villain who really isn't all that great. Evil Lyn from Masters of the Universe Revelations.
Psst, dude, I think you left some dead memes and overused sound effects on your editing timeline. It's almost like your editor doesn't have much confidence in the raw material. And I mean, they're not wrong, seeing as most of it is sloppy seconds from another Just a Robot video titled, "Why is there so much wokeness in shows nowadays?" Nowadays? Is my grandpa ghostwriting these for you? I only bring that video up because Just a Robot explicitly pointed us to it for additional context. We just had to watch it to fully comprehend Jar's Galaxy Brain Masters of the Universe revelations. They're so profound and irrefutable that he literally repeats all of his points verbatim in both videos.
He immediately loses it to Evil Lyn, who uses her feminine charm to get him to drop his guard. But then she uses her feminine charm to get Skeletor to drop his guard. She looks like a character from Baki. Turning herself into a character from Baki, I mean a master of the universe. So Lyn decides that she's going to destroy the entire universe, And because there's no order to the universe and God is dead, she decides she's going to destroy the universe. You only destroyed fucking heaven! But not before destroying fucking heaven. Evelyn sees the error of her ways and she's no longer evil because in current year women are never evil. But after a battle with Tila, she decides she doesn't want to be a villain anymore and gets reformed again.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
The takeaway from those clips I just showed, other than the fact that Just a Robot is a lazy self-plagiarist that sounds like a Teddy Ruxpin version of Saberspark who's running out of batteries, is that Evelyn is grossly overpowered and too easily forgiven for her villainous actions. Unlike Azula, who gets what she wants through manipulation and unique powers beyond the scope of most other characters in the setting, Evelyn gets what she wants through manipulation and unique powers beyond the scope of most other characters in the setting. And maybe he's right, but how did Just a Robot not notice that Evelyn is played by Lena Headey, who is not just the insanely evil Cersei Lannister in HBO's once-beloved Game of Thrones, but also the terrifying, murderous gang leader Mama in the 2012 Dredd movie? Honestly, an unsung classic. Both were irredeemable, were villains from start to finish, and were both given violent downfalls. Why does any of that matter? Well, those are the exact qualities needed for a female villain to pass the groundbreaking, world-shattering Mechanicist test. What is the Mechanicist test, you ask? Well, it is none other than Just a Robot's very own test to determine the good written ability of female villains. Let's hear it from the Mechanicist himself.
The Mechanicist test. A movie with a female villain will fail the Mechanicist test if A, the female villain is redeemed way too easily, or B, the female villain is actually not evil.
Before we unpack this any further, I've just gotta say, thank God the Mechanicus test only works on female villains. All of your favorite redeemed male villains are safe. Loki, Roy Batty, Severus Snape, Negan, Gideon Gleeful, Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2, Lord Business, Meruem from Hunter x Hunter, the T-800, and of course, Darth fucking Vader himself, who Jar has been using as B-roll for the good villains section of this video. But we'll get back to Vader later. While Just a Robot waits until almost the end of the video to introduce it, the Mechanicus test boils down his main problem with so-called modern female villains. He believes they're either not evil enough in the first place, or when they are, they're punished with a finger wag and a slap on the wrist. Jar's main example for the first condition is Disney's Maleficent, as played by Angelina Jolie. And he might have been onto something too, if the 2014 movie didn't change the original story to make her the protagonist. Well done, Jar. She's not the bad guy in this one, because she was never intended to be. Just a Robot even admits that the real villain of the movie is the king, but it's okay, because he's both super evil and doesn't get redeemed. So at least someone in this popcorn cash grab passes the Mechanicus test. Fuck it. I'm calling it the Mechanist test from now on, because Mechanicist is not a real word. He also makes the bizarre choice of criticizing Maleficent for overwriting the lore of Sleeping Beauty to make the female villain more sympathetic, then, bafflingly, says it should be more like Joker, a movie which absolutely portrays Arthur Fleck with a degree of sympathy, and doesn't slot into the canon of any previous iteration of the character. Seriously, does anyone remember the Batman movie where Bruce Wayne was beating up a 70-year-old dude in clown makeup? Because Fleck was already 50 when Bruce was a kid? Smells like a rewrite to me. But there's a place for rewrites. And it should have been in this part of the video.
I also heard they did something similar in the live-action Cruella movie, but I haven't seen that movie.
Oh, brother, why did he even include this? Is Jar already out of examples after giving like half of one? This video title claims that it's about the problem with female villains, and so far, I'm feeling clickbaited. Evelyn was the only actual villain he's brought up, and he fucking kinkos that shit from a previous video. This video should have been called, I Don't Like What Kevin Smith Did to Evelyn, Revelations. The truly ironic thing is that if he'd seen Cruella, he'd probably love the villain. Not Cruella, she's the protagonist. The actual villain, the Baroness, as played by Emma Thompson, an unrepentantly cruel, greedy, and manipulative fashion magnate who murders Cruella's mother and tries to kill her too, before being arrested and sent to prison for her crimes. She passes the Mechanist test with flying Dalmatian spots. But if Jar thinks that Maleficent and Cruella dropped the ball for giving an iconic villain a sympathetic origin story, imagine if that sympathetic origin story was stretched across not one, not two, but 3 of the worst movies of all time. Welcome back, Vader. Anakin Skywalker acts like an insufferable little shit for 5 agonizing hours before flipping and committing some religious genocide with a little bit of light child murder on the side, all because some Tusken Raiders killed his mom and he was scared about his wife dying, all of which is forgiven because he doesn't want his crusty old boss to tase his son to death. If we're talking about origin stories that strip the magic away from a once intimidating villain, the Star Wars prequel trilogy is the gold fucking standard. The Cruella flub isn't the only strange writing choice in Just a Robot's video either. He does eventually get to his second example of a modern female villain, Lady Dimitrescu, which he pretends to mispronounce because he's a hack, and can't even remember which game she's from.
From Resident Evil 7. Oh wait, sorry, my mistake, it was Resident Evil 8. I'm not a fan of the series, I don't keep up with it.
This is hilarious because if he'd played or even properly read the wiki summaries for either game, he'd know that they're both full of critically acclaimed female villains that also pass the mechanist test. Resident Evil 7 has Eveline. She's an evil, genetically altered little girl who's behind all the horror that takes place in the game and dies a gruesome death at the end. There's also Marguerite Baker, a terrifying half-insect woman who tries to violently murder you and also dies a gruesome death. Resident Evil 8 has Lady Dimitrescu, but she's not alone in the female villain department. Mother Miranda, a calculating, shape-shifting cult leader, is the final antagonist of the game, and is just as memorably creepy as any of the other 4 lords that serve under her. The Rogues Gallery also contains the twisted toy maker Donna Beneviento. She's the boss you fight right after Dimitrescu, and has an army of sentient dolls and the ability to bring people's worst nightmares to life. The level where Ethan is exploring her house and fighting against her mind games is widely praised as the scariest level in the whole game. She also dies a gruesome death, in case you were wondering. Something tells me that Just a Robot was aware of the existence of other female villains in RE8, but glosses over them because he's 10 minutes into a nothing video and the sunk cost fallacy has finally kicked in.
Everybody fucking loved that tall undead vampire mommy. And what did they do? Well, they had her die really early on, and the story was focused on this other female villain who no one remembers.
Your editor seems a little thirsty, man. You should ask them to bust before they send you the final cut of the video. Or better yet, fire them. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the editing style of Just a Robot's content is best described as iFunny on meth. Anytime he worries that the audience might be drifting off, the editor just spins the frame, deep fries some shoehorned viral clip you half remember from 2016, and blows your speakers out with the reverb on a fart noise. Come on, Jar. Save yourself the cringe and just edit your own videos. We both know you're not spending that extra time on the script. Oh, and also, he mentions the diamonds from Steven Universe as being too easily redeemed, which is news to nobody. You're telling me that Steven Universe overly relied on redemption arcs for its villains? Stop the fucking presses! You might have noticed that we haven't talked about Spy V's section yet, and honestly, it's because we didn't really have a problem with it. The crux of her argument is that huge, mass-market entertainment conglomerates like Disney are shaving down the edges of female characters in order to increase their appeal to a young, progressive audience, but end up alienating that same audience in the process by denying the characters in question depth and nuance. It's an apt criticism, but it feels out of place alongside Just a Robot's haphazard free association about one of the few things in this video he's actually watched. The main reason why Spy V comes across as more convincing than Jar in her arguments is that she isn't making some sweeping generalization about the decline of all female villains. She's talking about a specific phenomenon and the causes for it. The information presented is backed up by market trends that are plainly evident. Laying the blame for a widespread problem on the suits that have a disproportionate control over creativity hits closer to home because it offers a concrete explanation. It's certainly more substantial than Jar implying that every writer after 2010 got their talent energy bent out of them by the Soy Lord. To her credit, Spy V also raises the point that there are still many great female characters, villainous or otherwise, in modern media. They're just not by and large coming from kid-friendly summer blockbusters or cheesy nostalgia-bait cartoons based on a line of science fantasy toys from the 80s. And she's right about that. So right, in fact, that we prepared a list of female villains from recent years that not only passed the mechanist test, but are also well written by real standards. Spoilers ahead, so just stay on your toes. Much like Lady Dimitrescu, Monica of 2017's Doki Doki Literature Club became an online sensation, spawning countless pieces of fan art, fanfiction, memes, and full-on modded versions of the original game. Within the visual novel itself, Monica is shown to be a maniacal, possessive AI who toys with the other members of the Literature Club psychologically and eventually erases them all from existence so that the player character will be forced to love her and her alone. Just Monica, indeed. From Kingsman: The Golden Circle, we've got Poppy. portrayed by Julianne Moore. She's a global drug kingpin obsessed with 50s Americana and power. She'll grind up disobeying henchmen into hamburger meat. She'll threaten all of the world's drug users with a painful death just for her own benefit. And she's even got an awesome pair of killer robot dogs that actually almost murder real Elton John in the movie. In print media, that year also gave us Seiko Osabe from the horror manga Blood on the Tracks. She's a mother whose mind is quickly unraveling, leading to her becoming a huge danger to those closest to her, like her nephew and especially her son. She's not above pushing her own flesh and blood off a cliff thanks to her increasingly fractured psyche and unstable violent tendencies. Jordan Peele's debut masterpiece Get Out has Rose Armitage, a filthy rich, subtle seductress who conspires to have her boyfriend, Chris Washington, become a subject of her family's horrific body swapping project. Her body count is in the dozens, as she initiates false relationships with her usually black, usually male victims, auctioning them off to a network of wealthy elites. The scariest part about Rose is how good of an actor she can be when she needs to play innocent. Her mother, Missy Armitage, is also heavily involved in the whole affair, and her nasty trick with a teacup can induce a hellish state of purgatory on anyone who witnesses it via hypnosis. Speaking of mother-daughter villain combos, 2018's Sharp Objects had Amma and Adora, an overbearing mother and her bad seed. Adora keeps her children sick to keep them close, accidentally murdering one of her daughters when she takes it too far. Meanwhile, Amma leads a double life as the doting daughter, playing with dolls during the day and going out at night to murder other girls in town. If that wasn't enough, she rips out their teeth and uses them to tile the floor of her beloved dollhouse. Also from 2018 is Abigail from The Favorite. After being thrown into servitude, she decides to do whatever it takes to live the life she thinks she deserves. She lies, she manipulates, she betrays, she threatens, all to get in the good graces of the queen. No matter who she hurts, it's all worth it if she never has to work for anyone again. Over in TV, Killing Eve introduced us to Villanelle, a sadistic Russian hit woman who will kill anyone, for any reason, though for mostly money and amusement. She laughs at pictures of dead dogs, knows 100 different ways to infiltrate and murder her victims, and even backs over her ex-girlfriend with a truck. She's pure evil all the way down, and has plenty of fun carrying out her acts of professional murder. Then there's the terrifying portrayal of Rose the Hat by Rebecca Ferguson in the movie adaptation of Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. Rose is the leader of a cult of energy vampires known as the True Knot that will torture and kill psychic children in order to effectively eat their souls. She's utterly unrepentant, cruel, and malicious, and with incredible knowledge of psychic powers to bolster her iron will. She also gets one of the most memorable villain deaths in recent years, when she's torn apart at a metaphysical level by the Overlook Hotel's many ghosts. In 2019, the second season of The Boys gave us Stormfront, played by Aya Cash, a Nazi supervillain who uses a mix of lightning and memeing powers to advance her goals of total white supremacy. She slaughters and manipulates her way to her goals, experiencing zero guilt, and even giving the terrifying Homelander a run for his money. Her brand of pure, hateful evil also makes it immensely satisfying when she's beaten up, stabbed in the eye, and lasered beyond repair. Jordan Peele's second feature outing, Us, also brought us Red and Umbre, spiteful, scissor-wielding doppelgangers who will stop at nothing to kill and replace the humans they are tethered to. Red especially keeps the audience on their toes, providing the other half of an unforgettable display of acting range from Lupita Nyong'o. The video game Doom Eternal gave us the Khan Maker. This celestial scumbag is behind Hell's invasion of our reality, and from her sanctimonious perspective, the death and suffering of billions is all part of the plan. Hey, look, in 2021, we even got a good female Disney villain. In WandaVision, the ancient reality-warping witch Agatha Harkness took advantage of Wanda's grief and pain to pull all the strings and craft a world of her own. There, she was always just out of sight, pushing and pulling the action in the direction she wanted. She's a puppet master with incredible power and a hunger for even more of it. There's very little she won't stoop to. She even killed Sparky. She's evil as hell, but God is it fun to watch her. Another terrifying female villain from television is Misty Quigley from Yellow Jackets. She's a sugary sweet nurse who loves Andrew Lloyd Webber. She even listens to the Cats soundtrack in her car, so you know there's something deeply wrong with her. She'll smile and tell you a joke as she hands you a cup of poisoned tea. Misty is the definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing, a deadly nurturer who uses her skill for medicine and manipulation to exert control over everyone around her. Like Nurse Ratched and Annie Wilkes before her, Misty just wants to help. And when people don't let her help the way she wants to, well, God help them. Werewolves Within has Cecily. Cecily's a sweet small-town girl who just so happens to be a vicious werewolf. She might have her neighbors fooled into thinking she's just a kindly postal worker, but really she's got an insatiable hunger for human flesh, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to hide her secret. Her bite is way worse than her bark. The final season of Castlevania also concluded last year and heavily featured the bloodthirsty Carmilla as a major villain. As the resident schemer of the Vampire Coven of Styria, all well-written female characters in their own right by the way, Carmilla was introduced in Season 2 as one of Dracula's allies in the war against humanity. She quickly grew beyond this role, in no small part due to a combination of intelligence, charisma, and ambition. And before her explosive defeat at the hands of the redeemed male villain, Isaac, she was preparing an army of night things for total world conquest. Carmilla's name is also a reference to one of the first classic vampires in all of Gothic horror, much like Dracula. And that's just a handful of amazing modern female villains, all of which were just from the last 5 years. Most of them are also from incredibly successful pieces of media, too. We could go on much longer, because there's a ton more examples, and feel free to share any we missed down in the comments. But I think we've made the case that this wide trend of female villain decline is entirely imaginary. Look, I can't know what Jar has watched or even heard of from the above list, but for him to make this specific video with that specific title, he should have considered whether the plurality of data actually supported his claims. The thing about proving a point is, you need proof, and Just a Robot just doesn't have it. But hey, we here at the Dire Gentleman channel have now done all of Jar's homework for him, and he can come out of the trenches in No Brains land because the culture war is officially over. I want to clarify. I really don't think Jar is a bad person. I just think he's lazy, and desperately in need of a tune-up. And to help with that, we're going to take a leaf out of his pamphlet, and end this video with a little tip for him. If you want to have more interesting things to say about art, consume more of it. And I'm not just talking whatever Disney is sharting out, or whatever nostalgia-baked cartoon series is trending on Netflix. Read, watch, and listen broadly. There's a huge wealth of amazing creations in the past, and some incredible stuff coming out right now if you care to look for it. Instead of Joker, maybe you could work up the courage to watch King of Comedy or Taxi Driver. You know, real movies. Jar, you're presumably an adult now, and that means you're allowed to watch the big boy movies and shows. I know your parents probably don't want you watching the ones with boobies and swears in them, but you can watch them under the covers on your laptop really late at night, and they'll never even know! I realized that this wasn't much of a serious video, but Just a Robot is not a serious man.